Ladies and gents, today we're going to be talking about the road to certification and the role of, how the system works, what it includes, and how we can actually work together to make this thing, to grow this and to create a more sustainable industry in the long term. So with Gavin being my technical advisor on the other side, we can start. So thanks, Gavin. I've got a couple of things that we'd like to do from the for the program today. Gavin, can you advance? Thank you. And then just click through it. We're going to talk about the certifications. We're going to explain certification as a concept because there's quite a bit of confusion about what certification is. Then I'm going to talk about the EGF Sustainable Event Standard. We are going back a little bit on this, but it's important that you get background into where the certification system has come from. Then we're going to talk about how to apply that standard in your own event or your own business, why the EGF certification system is important and why you should be using it, how the system works, what is required to become certified, applying for certification, what you can expect in the process of certification, the actual certification process from start to finish, and becoming an assessor, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities here for people to become assessors. But we'll touch on some of the issues that were raised now by John and Justin. And then finally, we'll go into the next steps of sustainability. So we're going to be talking about all of these this morning. Please, if you've got any questions, add them onto the chat, and I'll get around to them at the end when we get to our Q&A session. So let's start with the certification explained. What is certification? Well, certification is an independent review of a service or a product conducted against a published standard. The emphasis here is the independent review. So in other words, certification is what is known as an eco-label. And eco-labels have three different types. You get a type 3, which is when you call yourself green when you perhaps have measured nothing. You get a type 2 when you measure your performance against your internal standards. And then you get the type 1, which is an external verification. And that is what the EGF certification standard is. We are an external type 1 label. The second item that we need to understand is it's designed to provide a mark of achievement of compliance against that standard. So, for example, the standard may say to you, purchase or ensure that you have used recyclable cutlery. Okay. What we would then do is we would mark the achievement of that. How recyclable was it? And did you in fact comply with that standard 100%? The third element, and very important, people, it is a voluntary process. No one can force you to become certified. This is a voluntary process. So in other words, if you head on the path of certification, make sure you're doing it according to the standard that's being measured. Otherwise, what you're going to find is that you never get certified. You go through the costs of certification, and because you don't understand the system, or you think it's a compulsory system, you would fail every time. So very important, it's a voluntary system. The fourth item is usually it's an annual or a more regular process. I saw in the early questions that came through is how long does a certification last? I will get back to it later, but just to give you the short answer on that, the certification is event specific. So in other words, if you are holding Indaba this year, the certification is for Indaba this year. It does not carry forward to Indaba 2026. So it's very important. It is usually an annual or more regular process. So it depends on how often your events are being held, and they are each individually assessed. Then generally, it is universally accepted. So in other words, this standard we have here is aligned with international systems, so it is generally accepted globally as an event certification standard. It is aligned with a couple of things, Gavin. The most important is that it's based on the ISO 14001 and the ISO 2012-1 standards. These are both international standards that are recognized globally. Give you an example, the Olympic Games in, I think it was in Germany, was measured against the ISO 2012-1 standard. Now, both of those standards are management systems. They are not event certification standards. So in other words, they measure the management capacity or the management impacts. The second thing is it was first published in 2017 by the EGF. So in other words, in 2017, we published the standard, and then it was updated again in 2025. Those standards get updated on usually a 5-year cycle, but obviously with COVID, it pushed us back a bit there. The standard addresses all aspects of events and meetings, everything from sustainable operations and the management systems, through to social and cultural criteria, through to the economic criteria, and finally to the environmental criteria of that event. So in other words, we're going to look at everything from the moment you start planning your event through to the time that you actually strike that event. Everything that happens in that period, we're going to evaluate and we're going to look at. The standard then also applies to, we've got a standard specifically for venues, exhibitions, transport selection, AV and production services, event marketing communications, and food and beverage services. So if you look at the standard, you will actually see what you need to do in each of those areas to actually achieve your certification at the end of the day. It's not onerous. It's actually very easy to get through. It was originally conceived quite a few years back, and introduced, and it was really to stop the greenwashing. The system that we're talking about here was developed by SBS, by Heritage, and it has been used for over 15 years. We've been involved in assessing and certifying events in South Africa for the last 15 years. And our list of events that have been certified ranges across the scope of events. Everything from sporting events through to product launches to things like the launch of government programs. We've really gone through the gamut. So we know the system works, it has been accepted, and it is recognized as such. We adapted this to meet the EGF standard in 2015 and published the same year, and we updated it in 2025. It's been approved and adopted by the EGF, as Justin was saying earlier this year. The standard itself provides an interpretational guide to the standard. So in other words, we've created a guide which says, if you're looking at administration, this is what you need to consider in order to achieve your certification at the end of the day. So there's a step-by-step guide that goes with this. So it's not just reading a standards document and not understanding what it entails. There is a guide that actually explains every step to you. It provides clear assessment and evaluation methodologies. We will tell you how we're going to score. We will tell you what scores high and what scores low at the end of the day. And it's up to you then to decide how far you want to go with implementing that particular standard or that particular activity that you're doing. It demonstrates a clear separation between the assessment and consulting activities. As John and Justin both mentioned, we can't have a referee and player situation running here. So consultants can actually go in and advise a client on how to meet a green standard. We give you all the tools that you need to do that. And what it does is it actually adds to your little quiver of packages that you offer your clients. But you cannot also assess that event. That has to be done by a different person and only by an accredited EGF assessor. So that's where we are there. It's developed an integrated scoring methodology, which means there's a comprehensive and balanced scoring methodology in respect of each criteria. I'll get into that a little bit later just to try and clarify where it's coming from. That the scoring methodology reflects current best practice in the events industry. So in other words, we're going to say to you, yes, you've got you've got a registration process with lanyards and name tags, but here's where you should be going. This is the quality and the sustainability level you should be aiming for. And that's how we actually help you improve your service over a period of time. And that each category is scored in a weighted manner to ensure a fair balance between the varying categories' importance perceptions. What that means is that, let's, for example, say that the emphasis in South Africa at this point of time is in job creation, cultural identity, whatever it may be. Those scores on our evaluation system carry a weight which is higher than a normal weight. So in other words, some things like, difficult to give you an example off the top of my head. When you score 10, the actual score coming through on the evaluation sheet is only 8. Whereas others, you'll score a 10 and it will actually come out at a 12 or 11 and a half or whatever. So the scoring is put in there to actually reflect what's happening locally and what's happening globally in terms of event management. And what the EGF has also done is committed to undertaking regular certification criteria revisions. All right, adopting and using the standard. Anyone can adopt and implement the standard. Okay. Gavin, if we can just move on. Anyone can adopt and implement the standard. There is no obligation to become certified, but for those that implement the standard fully, certification provides considerable brand benefits, both to you and to your client at the end of the day. So we need to remember that. Third item down the line is we need to download it. You can download a checklist from the EGF to make it easier for you. So we've got a step-by-step guide that you can actually use, and you can tick it off as you're planning your event. We've addressed the sustainability vision statement. We've addressed responsible procurement. We've addressed each item down that list. So it actually helps you plan your event more sustainably. It saves you money in the long time, but most important, it helps you, if you're a professional conference organizer, or if you are a corporate client who wants to develop these things internally, it helps you build your sustainability skills over a period of time. So it applies the standard ISO approach of plan, do, check, and act. All right. You need to plan your event, and you already plan your event, but now you need to plan it taking into account your sustainability elements. You need to do. So in other words, you need to implement those things. It's one thing to say, I'm going to do it. It's a different thing to actually do it. Then you will check it at the end of the day. You'll see whether it worked for you, what didn't work, how it worked, what you can improve on. And then finally, you'll act on those things that you found. And that creates your continual improvement cycle. That's the aim of certification. It's to help you improve your overall performance through learning and through the actual implementation and application of the standard system. It helps you learn from your performance as part of your continual learning process. And in applying for certification, it allows you to apply once you feel confident that you've met a standard. I'm not saying don't do anything until you actually meet the standard. That's not what we're saying. We're saying get involved as early as you can. Get yourself somebody who understands the standard, or if you understand the standard very well, go in, apply it to your next event, apply it to your planning process, and then apply for certification. No problem. Some of you are going, sometimes you'll win, sometimes you may just miss it, but at least when you get the report at the end of the day and the results of that evaluation, you'll learn how to make it better next time. And that's the key of it. It's the only event-specific certification scheme which is based on the ISO system globally. All the other ISO systems are management systems. This is something that actually measures both your management capacity and the outcomes at the end of the day. So in other words, you've implemented an energy-saving system. Now we measure how effective that was at the end of the day. So how many generators did you use? Have you been using sustainable energy? How much energy have you managed to minimize through clever planning? These are all the things we start looking at the end of the day. It's all about saying, here's a standard, but what are you doing to make that standard work? The standard provides an international benchmark for sustainability performance. As I've said to you before, this is benchmarked globally. It's specifically designed to address sustainability in the meetings and events sector. Now, I said earlier that we've got standards there for audio and AV, for example. All that means is that somebody in those sectors would actually apply those specific standards to what they are doing. And when you appoint, if you're a PCO and you're appointing that service provider to do that job for you, you would be able to measure him against that standard. So in other words, you'll be able to say to him in your RFQ, I need the following things. In other words, it's got to be LED lights. You cannot use high-powered systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a couple of things that we can learn from that process. It serves as a skills development process to enhance your performance. It offers additional service options for organizers and event managers. Here is a tool that you can use to sell your services to the eventing industry. The days of brown events are gone. We need to move forward. We need to become more sustainable and more responsible into the future. And here is a tool that you can use. It costs you nothing to use it. It's there. It's available on the EGF website. Take it, make it work for you. And it provides your clients with greater brand and reputational benefits. Now, it's always difficult to say, what are the benefits of certification? Well, the most important benefit is brand or reputational protection. That's the most important. So in other words, it's very difficult for Exaro to go out there and say, we're a green company, when you know they're digging up coal mines all over the country. But if they can go out and say, as part of our corporate social responsibility, we've in fact made sure that all of our events are green. So it helps them, it gives them PR value to the process and helps them actually report in a more sustainable manner in the long term. So it provides them with these benefits. There are immediate cost savings as far as this is concerned, because you've got lower input costs of energy, water, waste. It improves your community relations in terms of involving local communities, making sure that the gifts, the products, the services you provide are sourced locally. So suddenly you're bringing economic benefit into your local economy. Those are the benefits that come from certification. And it's simply a case of actually selling these things to your clients. So how do you get it going? Well, it starts with you downloading and implementing the EGF Standard for sustainable events. Okay, that is available on the website today. You can download it, read through it. The corresponding guide to those standards will be up by the end of the month. You can actually then say, okay, the standard says I must do this. Now go to the interpretation guide and see what that actually entails. In other words, what would score high, what would score low, and how effective it is. What's low in implementation and what's world-class. And that's what you're looking for. It will use it to plan and manage your event from its inception to the strike. It doesn't help. It doesn't help that we've got the greatest environmental vision. But if we don't implement it right from the planning stage of an event, you will undoubtedly fail at the end of the day from a certification point of view. I can name a number of events that have done this as a last minute thing. So in other words, they've gone through the planning for 8 months, and 2 weeks before the event, they suddenly decide, oh, hold on, we want this event certified. Chances of that being certified, unless you really know your standard and you know your business, are very, very slim. So you need to bring it in right at the beginning of your planning. Sell this to your client. Make sure your client understands the benefits associated with it. Build it into your budgeting, because at the end of the day, you are going to get a report which acts as a teaching aid for you. It's going to help you improve your very next event. It's going to help your client improve his next planning process. So there's a number of benefits associated with it. Ensure that everything you do for the event is aligned with the standard. Review and critique your performance and the extent to which you actually meet that standard. I said to you in the previous slide, the plan, do, act review process. That has to be done all the time. Review your performance, even if you're not going for certification. Review your performance and say, could I have done the waste management better than I did? Could I have provided more local cultural involvement? The gifts that I bought, did I have to have the Chinese-made gifts, or could I have used something from local community craftsmen? Those are the things that you now need to start looking at, and that's the type of issues that we look at when we're certifying an event. Learn from your experience and use the results to start your improvement process. No, the greenest event is the one that you've never held. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, here's a tool that can actually help you get to that event and get to that green event status. And that's what we're looking for ultimately. And if you're satisfied that you have met the standard and that you stand a good chance of getting through it, apply for certification of your next event. People, even if you don't reach certification, you would have received a report and skills that really help you move along here. All right, becoming certified will ensure that you meet the standard before you start the certification process, because there's a cost involved in the assessment process. There is a cost. You have the cost of the assessor, you have the cost of their travel, you have the cost of their accommodation and their food and beverage. Those costs will come in. So in that, when you start the process and you ask for RFQs, get these things and build it into your budgets, because that helps you right from the word go. If you're unsure of how to proceed, get hold of a sustainability consultant who knows the standard and knows how to get your event to that certification the successful certification stage. They are invaluable. You can do it yourself. You can do it over a period of time, learning as you go along, applying the standard, asking the questions. Maintain your membership. If you're not a member of the Event Greening Forum at this stage, become a member, because you will earn incredible knowledge out of that process. There is so much that can be shared through the EGF. Contact one of the EGF accredited assessors to undertake an assessment. So in other words, you're going to ask one of the accredited assessors or any number of them, to provide you with a proposal. You then select the proposal that makes the most sense to you, budgetary and skills-wise, and you enter an agreement with that assessor to do the work for you. Remember, you're entering a contractual process or a contractual relationship with your assessor. The assessor will attend your event and will evaluate compliance with each aspect of the standard and sub-events on a standard review format. On the right-hand side, you'll see there is just an image of the score sheet that we use. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but it gives you an idea. There's 72 items that the assessor will be evaluating. Those items all speak to the standard. So it's really a simple case of actually saying, okay, where do we go from here? How well did I score here? And what is the overall score at the end of the day? Following the event, you will receive a report on your performance and, if successful, certification from the EGF. And finally, you can use that report to improve on your performance in the next event, and you can even use the success that you've had to market yourself to future clients. So there's quite a lot that one action could do. Now, I spoke about the score sheet here. If you look at this, this is just a small part of the score sheet that we have. And each one of these parts, you see administration and planning, destination selection, venue selection, transport selection. And under each of those, there are elements that we look at. And each of those elements speaks to a standard. So we look at the environmental vision statement. This is a statement of intent. This is something that you draw up at the early stages, and you get your client or the event owner to sign it off. It's a commitment to provide a more sustainable event by managing water, managing waste, managing overproduction, all of those elements. And we've got an example of an event sustainability vision statement through the EGF. Download it, use it for your own event. But please remember, it must be signed by the event owner, not by the consultant or the event organizer. There's no buy-in from the owner at that point in time. So which means if he hasn't bought in, he's likely, or she is likely, to override your sustainability recommendations that you've put in. And that would then obviously reduce your scoreability. We look at your supplier environmental status. So in other words, are you choosing suppliers? Just go back again, Gav. Are you choosing suppliers that share your sustainability statement, your vision, or are you just going ahead and you grab anyone who's out there? We've seen this happen in the past. We've seen, Gavin, can you move one forward, please? We've seen it happen in the past, and what happens then is that, in spite of all the efforts that you as the planner do to make this work, your supplier is undermining your efforts by not buying into the same vision. So in other words, you've asked for a EV company to come in and provide you lighting, and you specified that it has to be low energy lamping, and they bring in high energy lamping. By then it's too late. You've already chosen somebody who could not do the work properly or could not meet your standard, and that's going to undermine everything that you're trying to do. The same thing happens with food and beverage. The same thing happens with transport. All of these things have to be built into it at the end of the day. We seem to have lost where we are. I'm just going to go one or two. There we go. Thanks, Gowan. your purchasing activities. Where are you getting your products from? Your goodie bag. What does that include in that goodie bag? Are these items you bought through a local supplier who's imported them from China? Or have you actually gone to local craftsmen and local artists and got stuff that they have? And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how successful this can be. We look at the recyclability levels of what you are providing. For example, one of the things that we find in a lot of events would be banners and signage. Are they recyclable? Can they be reused? Let me give you an example. You have a banner for your event and it's got a date on it. If that event is an annual event, it means you're going to reprint that banner every year. Don't have that, because you're going to get a lower recyclability score on that, because without that date, you can reuse that banner for a number of events before you change the theme of the event. And so we go through your destination. Have you chosen a destination that makes sense? So in other words, if all your clients live in Johannesburg, if all the delegates coming to that event live in the greater Gauteng area, and you decide to hold your event in Mossel Bay, for argument's sake, you're going to have a travel impact as far as that's concerned, because you've now got to fly or transport all of your delegates to a totally different region. That impact counts against you. You'll see your travel requirements and your offset considerations. Those are where your scores start getting hurt. The same thing with your venue. When you choose a venue, ensure that they have a sustainability or a green policy, so that they are able to do things like measure energy, measure water, measure and minimize waste. Those are the things that are important. We've had so many events where we go to these places, they have nothing like that. And that counts against you at the end of the day. So choose your venue carefully. This is how the score sheet works. This is how we actually try and get you to the next level. Transport selection, the same thing. If you're requiring air travel, coaches, ship travel, whatever it may be, to get your delegates to you, you need to have some kind of offset in place. And an offset gets done at the very beginning. In other words, you've budgeted for that offset right in the very beginning. Gav, we can move to the next one. All right, what you can expect. You can expect an independent professional evaluation of your performance. You can expect a comprehensive report detailing how well you have performed, where the shortcomings were, and how to improve. And at the bottom, you'll see an example of a report that we've developed. And finally, you'll get reputational benefits and being identified as a sustainability partner by your clients. In the graphics at the bottom, you'll see on the second page there, that gives you an idea of how for example, we've measured the transport and the travel impacts of your event. The next one, that blue column on the right-hand side, is your score for every single sector of the score sheet. We provide a photographic record of what we've seen, what we've found, what's good and what's bad. And you get a copy of the score sheet at the end of the day. And in your report, on the right-hand side, you'll see a sustainability performance at a glance. And that shows you had 350 delegates that used up 1,710 rooms over a 4-night stay. The number of days was 5 days. And that gives you an idea of how well your event performed over that period of time. Just at a glance, you can immediately see how much waste you created, 350 tons. You can immediately see how many kilometers were traveled, average travel, 330 kilometers. So we immediately can tell all of these things at a glance on your report. That is what you then sell to your client. That is what your client then finally gets from you. If we go on, the process is quite simple. Once you've selected your assessor, he or she is responsible for the event assessment. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a table there, which says select your EGF assessor. The event undergoes assessment. So the assessor will come along and they will undertake a review of your event from every angle. Okay. The assessor concludes his report, the scorecard and the report. That doesn't happen at the event. That usually happens after the event, because a lot of events, we require the information such as how much energy was used, how much waste was created, etc. And that information sometimes only comes a day or two after the event. So that is all done behind the scenes. Once that report has been done, okay, they submit that report to the EGF for moderation and quality assurance. So in other words, the EGF convene a certification panel, and they review the score sheet and complete the quality assurance review of your report to ensure that what you're going to get at the end of the day both helps you grow, but at the same time identifies where you can do better. We need to be able to learn from the process, otherwise it's a pointless exercise. Once the EGF have made a decision, the EGF then considers it and makes a decision on that submission. All right. If they need additional information, they're going to come back to the assessor and they need to provide that information. So the assessor is fully responsible for that final report and what comes out at the end of the day. And finally, they then, if the outcome is within the certification scores, then you receive the report and the certificate of compliance from the EGF. Okay, now let's, for example, say that the report and the scores don't warrant a certification. And just to give you an idea, certification requires a 75% compliance, actually a 70% compliance with the standard. And it's not as difficult as you think it is. It's actually not a difficult process at all. But there are going to be cases where you fall below that 70%, which means you will get a report and your client will get a report, but the event will not be certified, and you will be told why it wasn't certified. So don't be afraid that you're going to fail. There is no such thing as fail. You may not get a certification, but you haven't failed. You're actually learning in the process, because the next time you do your event, it's going to be a hell of a lot better, and it's going to be quite a learning curve for everyone. And importantly, you have a 21-day period to review the report and request any amendments or corrections. So in other words, if you're unhappy with what the EGF has decided, you can actually apply back to the EGF for a review of their decision. And they would then go back and they would start asking the assessor for additional information. So there's quite a lot of things that we can actually learn from the process. Let's have a look at a couple of, let's get practical a moment and look at a couple of events that we've been involved in over the last couple of years. And I'm going to start with the Nedbank Golf Challenge. This goes back quite a few years. This is in 2010. The event itself was held over 4 days, and there are 130,000 visitors that attended that event. Okay. The waste that was generated was 48 tons of waste with a 72% recovery rate. If we bear in mind that at Sun City, they live in their own micro environment, and everything that is generated waste-wise stays at Sun City. Water consumed at Sun City is provided by Sun City. So all of these things impact, at the end of the day, a much larger ecosystem. There were 4.2 million liters of water consumed for that event, and the total impact in terms of tonnage of CO2 as a result of that event was 659 tons of CO2. And that was related to things like cars, the buses, the airline tickets of the players coming in, the travel arrangements associated with everyone who came there, included hotel accommodation. Because at the beginning of an event, we try and determine what the scope of that event, of that assessment is going to be. And on this particular event, Sun City and Nedbank chose to do the entire event. So they achieved certification in the silver class. In other words, they achieved higher than 75%. In fact, I think they made an 83% on this event. And they became the very first sporting event in South Africa to be certified. So that is quite an achievement for a company like Sun International. The next one we have a look at is the Exara Safety Summit. And we're coming look more up to date on this one. This was held earlier this year, a period of 2 days in Gauteng. There were 1,524 delegates at this event. They created 9.5 tons of waste. For that number of delegates, and you consider the Sun City waste levels, that was quite a heavy event. And that was 75% of that was recovered. So on site at this venue, they have their own recovery system where they separate their waste and they get it back in again. And they recycle it. They consume 230 kiloliters of water. That's 230,000 liters of water at the event. That was both drinking water, preparation water, and cleaning. The total impact of that event was 35.3 tons of CO2. They achieved certification in silver class, but only just got through. And if you have a look at the photographs at the bottom, you'll see on the left-hand side, starting from the left, you'll notice that we've got these were the center table arrangements. It was all food and edibles that were placed in the center of the tables at the various dining venues. Here, the second one is an example of the waste that was being created. This plastic, you can see a pile of plastic in the background there. That was just dumped at the event at the end of the day, which was a breach of the agreement that they had with their supplier, who was supposed to have taken that waste back to their factory or their warehouse and dispose of it there. This was left on site, and the hotel had to actually then dispose of it. So that counted against them. They had their own osmosis water systems in there, where the delegates were each received a water bottle, and they went up to the machine and they filled their water bottles for it. So there were supposed to be no water bottles on the tables. However, once again, because the hotel didn't understand what the organizers were trying to do, they suddenly rolled out over 1,000 bottles of bottled water and started putting them out on the tables, in total contrast to what they had been asked to do. That obviously counted against them. They used these cardboard display stands, exhibition stands, which at the end of the event were donated to local schools in the Mpumalanga area and Limpopo area for libraries, which shows just what a company can do by just thinking a little bit outside of the box. Major benefit, major points were scored in this one. Here's just a view of some of the goodie bags that were given away to 1,524 delegates. They contained everything from scarves to water bottles to the only thing they didn't have in there was a vuvuzela. A lot of it was local, but much of the stuff actually came through from suppliers that were bringing it in from China. And then finally, they had a problem with their coaching. They had to bring these delegates all the way to Gauteng, to Boksburg, from areas like Lephalale, from Witbank, etc., etc. It comes back to what was said earlier. Choose your destination carefully. You have your event where the majority of your delegates are going to come from, and that makes a big difference. Here they made a certification silver class in 2025, but the same event 5 years ago set the highest score ever achieved for a green event in this country. It was a 98% compliance, and that took place at their head office, which is a green building in Centurion. Once again, they had a problem with busing in, but so many other elements actually provided positive scores, which helped them at the end of the day. The next client we have is the G20 Tourism Ministers Working Group, which took place in October this year. As you know, we're into the G20 this week in Johannesburg. And this one was a brave decision taken by the Department of Tourism and South African Tourism, for which we really acknowledge their bravery in doing this. It was last minute. It was a difficult thing to do. There were 4 separate events that all sort of culminated in one overall performance. There were 350 delegates over the period of that time. Some of them had less delegates, some had more. They created 2.5 tons of waste with a 75% recovery. This event was held at Kakuza in Kruger National Park. So being a tourism working group, we had to understand the reason for the destination was very clear. Here they had tourism ministers from the G20 countries all coming to South Africa. Let's show them the wildlife taken to the Kruger Park. Let's show them Mpumalanga. So there was a lot of mitigation as to why they chose that destination. In spite of that, they still created 123.6 tons of CO2, mostly as a result of transport. So once again, you have these issues in there. And that sort of lowers your overall score in spite of how well you're doing in other areas. And the majority of those CO2 emissions were as a result of transport because of the destination selected. They consumed 19,320 liters of water. It was hot. It was very hot. And those 4 events were each measured in their own right. Okay. If we look at the photographs, the first 2 show the actual event itself, which was extremely well planned. As I said, this was a last-minute certification request. A lot of this work had been done in advance by the Department of Tourism and SAT. So, for example, they had selected the venues, they had selected the transport, they had decided who was coming. So there was very little that the event coordinator could actually do here, other than just work within the parameters and try and make it as green as possible. Signage was used over and over again throughout the event, and while it will be used this week in Johannesburg, at the end of November, when the G20 is finished in South Africa, these signs all get trashed. We hope that the signage will be repurposed into delegate bags or whatever it may be. But the bottom line is we need to bear in mind whether we can reuse this again. If you can't, go electronic. Try and minimize the amount of printing that you use, which could come back and bite you. This was a sum total of the recycling that took place at one of the hotels that we knew. It was a single lonely little bin that stood outside the exhibition, outside the main convention room. Everything else was thrown together and was an attempt were made to separate it from the main rubbish collection point in the hotel. Your recovery rate showed 75%, but that was mostly as a result of Kruger National Park, who actually collect the stuff they recycle because they cannot bury the stuff in the Kruger Park. Here's an example of how, once again, good ideas go wrong. Those mints are all individually wrapped. What do we learn from a green event? Do not have single-serve items. You need to avoid single-serve items. Why didn't we put fruit on the tables rather than mints? Why? There's so many alternatives we can use to things like this. So once again, that sort of counts against them. The gifts they provided, two at the back there, unfortunately, you can't really, well, let's have a look at the next photograph first. This was their sustainability village. Now, if you remember at the Exaro event, they used cardboard exhibition stands. Here at the G20, these were specially made out of wood. A novel approach, I can understand why they did it, but will these ever be reused by Mpumalanga tourism? That's the question that we had here. And that's the sort of thing you need to bear in mind when you're doing these things. There are more sustainable alternatives out there, and this is the aim of the system, is to encourage you to move in that sustainable direction. Gifts-wise, we could not fault them on the gifts. The gifts were all made locally. They were made out of recycled rubber. They were made by local vendors. They were made by local craftsmen. The craftsmen at the Sustainability Village, you won't believe the quality of the stuff they were putting out. And they made a huge amount of money out of the delegates that came through to the event. And then probably to me, the highlight, this flower arrangement on the right-hand side was used at their ministerial closing dinner, which those table arrangements, all right, probably impractical from a point of trying to look over them when you're looking at the other person on the other side of the table. But those proteas and the stands were made out of recycled books. They were made by local craftspeople in the area of Hazyview. The baskets they were in were locally made. The tablecloth, that Shweshwe tablecloth, was locally printed. The serviettes matched the tablecloths. It was incredible. And as a result of that, certification was awarded in silver class, but only of the 4 events, only 2 received certification. So it shows that in spite of everything that they were trying to do, some of them were doing very well, some of them weren't doing so good. But at the end of the day, the overall rating was a silver class. So at least they were moving forward. And this is what it's all about, people. It's about going forward and learning from where we are, take it to the next level, improve on the next event, keep it going. And we hope that the SAT and the department have been encouraged by this report, and they'll keep doing this because this is the direction that we should be going as a country. And then we did the Board of Airline Representatives. So this was an event held once again in Skukuza at the conference center, the same event, same venue as the G20. This was held earlier this year over 2 days. There are 135 delegates. It generated 4.8 tons of waste, of which 82% was food waste. People, this is something that can be avoided. Food waste was 82%. Water consumed, 3.9 kiloliters, 3,900 liters. The total impact was 169.8 tons of CO2. That was related to air travel. Because remember now, we've got the Board of Airlines are based in Johannesburg. All the airlines are based in Johannesburg, and they all had to fly to Skukuza, which obviously impacted on the overall thing. Once again, however, they achieved a certification in silver class because of a number of things they were doing. There's a couple of the gifts that were provided to them. There were recycling bins in the main hall, not the prettiest, but they served their purpose. This was the view. There's the view of the main lobby area outside the conference center. Beautifully maintained. There was information points. The recycling bins were there. It was monitored well. The air conditioning was monitored. Everything was there that we needed. They once again used banners, but those banners have been used at previous events and will be used again in the future because there's no dates on them. So if you compare it with the G20, G20 can't use them again into the future. Food-wise, it was mostly buffets throughout the event, but as I say, there was a lot of food waste at that event. And it's something that one would need to obviously check into the future. And then they also had the form of a sustainability village, a very small exhibition there, but at least they offered local crafts and gifts to the delegates themselves. And then finally, the Tourism Business Council of South Africa in 2023, that one was certified as well, and that was held at Sun City. And the very first slide you see there is how they communicated their environmental vision to their delegates. And you can see in this little booklet that the delegates got, they've got to take steps to make conference green and environmentally sustainable. They give points on how you can actually make how you as a delegate can assist in making this event green. They put their colors on the mast, and that is a critical part of any green event. If you do that, the chances are you're going to score incredibly well on your score sheet. You need to have your vision statement visible, published, and made available to your delegates. Board of Airline Representatives had it on their app, which was live throughout the event. The G20 didn't have one. Exaro had it on their app. The Nedbank Golf Challenge had printed, they had banners, they had notifications wherever you could go. Their big screens around the show all showed the sustainability message throughout the event. So here at TBCSA, they did a brilliant job of actually raising awareness of sustainability. The next slide shows you one of the evening events where they were using local flowers, local artists, LED screens, LED lighting systems. Brilliant, saved so much energy. They had their recycling bins outside all the meeting rooms. They had recycling bins at the beach where they had their beach party. It was one of their events was a golf event, which they handled incredibly well. It was green, it was sustainable. There was no, everything they had thought of was there. They had the beach party. They were doing so well. And then they had the fireworks display. Fireworks in a green event do not go together. Fireworks are not only disturbing to animals, they are disturbing to human beings. They are a huge source of pollution. They are outdated. If you look at any of the international events that are taking place today, they're now into the drone technology. They're now into using lasers and light shows. Fireworks are antiquated. And we took a dim view of it at that stage because not only was it fireworks, but this was in Sun City where the Valley of the Waves borders the national park. And we've been asking for years that they don't do it. But this is a package that Sun City sells their clients. And we say to you, when you're planning your event, if the package includes a fireworks display, chuck it out, get rid of it. There are other ways of wowing your guests. Fireworks are not the way. And that brought their overall score down considerably. There were 674 delegates over 2 days, 5.5 tons of waste with an 80% recovery rate. They used 7,300 liters of water. The total impact is 260 tons. They achieved a silver class. Let's go back to the water for a second. That looks very low for a 2-day event, but what the scope of this event did not include accommodation. And the reason for that is that unless it is paid for by the client, you or the event owner, it can be excluded from your evaluation at the end of the day. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, your scope of your event must cover everything that the client is paying for. If they're not paying for it, so for example, they're not paying for air tickets, you take that out of the evaluation of travel. If they aren't paying for goodie bags, for example, say, you can't necessarily take that out of the evaluation, because if those goodie bags are provided by suppliers, those suppliers were contracted as part of the overall budget. So at the TBCSA event, they ring-fenced the activity we were evaluating. They achieved certification in silver class. So these are just 5 events that give you an idea of how well they did or where they didn't do very well. We have had events that have achieved gold status. We have had events that have achieved platinum status, which is 95%. Gold is from 85%. It can be done. It is not a difficult process to do. What are the lessons that we've learned? Well, firstly, there's a lack of sustainability vision at the very outset on commencement. Okay, so in other words, you need to have built in sustainability from the word go. If you don't do that, you are missing it. If you don't have a sustainability vision statement that you've published, it's up there, everyone can see it, everyone understands it, every delegate knows it's there, and they know how they can help you achieve it, then obviously you haven't done it the right way. That particular vision statement probably has one of the highest weights on the score sheet. You don't do that, you get a fat 0 on the score sheet, and that can hurt you at the end of the day. Not saying you won't get certification, but your chances of being certified become so much less because of the weighting on that. It's about communication. The second lesson we've learned is mismanaged waste and overproduction. On the right-hand side, you'll see a couple of photographs. This is waste, which is created. The first photograph, that's waste created at Indaba. Okay. This is the amount of waste that's coming through. It's plastic, it's wood, it's carpets, it's cardboard, it's bottles, it's wine bottles. You won't believe the amount of waste generated by an event such as Indaba. It's huge. The other area is overproduction in food. If you do not cater correctly for your delegates, that becomes waste, avoidable waste. The highest food waste we have ever recorded was 92%. At an event where the MC forgot to invite the guests to go to the next room for dinner. And they all climbed back on their coaches and went back to their hotels complaining about the fact they weren't fed. That is how simple communication can fail. So food production and overproduction have to be catered for very carefully. The third element is destination and transport. I've spoken about your destination before. Choose your destination carefully. Sometimes your client has already decided where he wants to be. That's fine. Now let's work around that. Let's work the best way of getting delegates there. Is it easier to get them all into coaches and take them in coaches, or must everyone drive in their own car? Own car, suddenly your carbon impacts increase dramatically. Try and get the most effective transport to meet the destination that you're using. Keep as local as far as possible. And remember that destinations of a distance impact on local communities. It's what's known as eagle management, where you fly in, you hold your event, and you leave. And there's absolutely no benefit left to the local community unless it is planned in your sustainability vision. Venues and sustainability capability. Your venues are very important. I've said that before. If a venue cannot measure waste, energy, water, and numbers, and they can't provide food in a sustainable manner, you need to find another venue. A very good venue is the Vineyard Hotel, and Chris, I know you're part of this, and well done on it. I think you guys plan it so effectively. Everything is in place. You can do all of these things because the Vineyard has a very good sustainability management system in place, so they can do all of this. So what you do is when you're choosing your venue, choose one that can actually provide you this information. Because without that information, your assessor is going to have to benchmark you against other events of a similar size, irrespective of whether you've saved energy or not. You need that information in place. Without it, we cannot score it, and that unfortunately works against you at the end of the day. And then finally, purchasing and procurement at all levels. It starts at your selection of suppliers. It starts at your service providers. It starts with your venue. Make sure that when you're entering these agreements, you've got all these questions answered. Do not approach an exhibition company that cannot provide you with sustainable exhibition facilities. It's pointless. If you're going to the old aluminium systems, guys, there are better ways of doing it. You don't need to scrape through on that. Right, let's have a look now at who the assessors are. Well, if you want to become an assessor is a person who has met the specific conditions and has been trained to interpret and measure compliance to the EGF standard. Guys, assessors are not superhumans. Assessors can make errors as well. But the fact of the matter is these are people who have met the criteria necessary to be considered as an assessor. They have experience in the industry. They know what they're looking for. They have organized that. In other words, they've worn the T-shirt before. That's who we're looking for assessors. People who can actually go there and know how to assess something against a standard. Whether you've been in the events industry or in the tourism industry, you've got the skills that the EGF is looking for. And that's what we're looking for in our assessors. The assessor must have proven experience in event management and a good understanding of sustainability issues in the sector. All right, so you need to know the standard. Get to understand that standard, because we have created an interpretation guide for assessors where we actually say, when you're evaluating transport, these are the things you need to look for, okay? They will be trained in that, but at the same time, it helps if you already have an understanding of what good green event management consists of. It's not a be-all and end-all, it's not do or die, but it certainly helps your application. The assessor must be a full member in good standing of the EGF. If you are a member of the EGF through an association, okay, so let's, for example, let me give you an example. Justin's company, Scan Displays, they are a member of the EGF, okay? If you are a member of staff of Justin's company, you don't qualify as a member in your own right. You would need, if you want to be an assessor, you need to become a full member of the EGF in your own right. The only instance where a company representative is considered is if they're a board member or an owner of the company. Then they can apply to be an assessor. So there are very strict rules as far as who that is, purely because we want to be able to control the quality of the assessors coming through the system so that the assessors that you choose are capable of doing their job as efficiently and professionally as possible. The assessor must provide a motivation in support of the application for consideration. Why do you want to be an assessor? Why do you think you can add value? Can you add value, and how are you going to do it? So motivate why you want to be an assessor so that the panel can actually evaluate whether you're the right sort of material that we want and you're worth putting through the training and actually providing with opportunities in the future. Remember, as an assessor, you are an individual business. You are not employed by the EGF. You are not, you have a code of understanding. You have an agreement that you enter into with the EGF, but you are not employed by the EGF. This is your business. You will make money as your business by becoming an assessor. So you need to be able to motivate why you want to do it. If you say it's for money, I can tell you there's a lot of easier ways of making money than being an assessor. Assessors must undergo training in the evaluation system and interpretation process by SBS, Sustainability Benchmark Solutions, which is my company, before being accredited by the EGF. So I will put you through a training process, which includes 1 full day of interpretation and systems knowledge, and then a second day, or it could be day 2, 3, 4 days, where you evaluate an event under supervision, under my supervision. So in other words, I'm going to teach you first how you interpret the score sheet, how the score sheet works, what to look for. And then I'm going to go with you to an event that you've selected, and we're going to go and do an evaluation of that event where I'm watching what you're doing, I'm guiding you, I'm helping you make sure that it works. I will then help you in terms of writing the report you need to do and submitting your score sheet. Once you've done that, once I'm satisfied that you are capable of interpreting and applying the standard, then I make a recommendation to the EGF, and they then decide to accredit you or not to accredit you based on your skills. And assessors are continually monitored for accuracy and fairness in the assessment process. So in other words, we're going to be monitoring you with the reports you're sending through, with the reviews we're getting, with the way in which you're doing the work over a longer period of time. And that's how we're going to help you improve you as a person, that you can actually provide the skill far more efficiently, far more effectively, and you build your own brand. That's what this opportunity provides you. Okay. Here's the process for assessor training. If we go into the orange at the left-hand side, you start the process, you apply to the EGF to be accredited. The EGF confirms that you've met the criteria that they require. You then pay for your training with SBS. You do the training with us. We then do a test review, or we do a review under supervision. And once we've confirmed your competency, your application goes forward to the EGF, where you sign your agreement with the EGF. They add you to their list of assessors on their website, and away you go. You're an assessor. We will monitor your performance over the lifetime of however many events that you want to do. If you don't manage to get through the training, we then go back to the test review, and we redo a review, and once again, we go back through the process. So there's a continual process which helps you achieve what we want to achieve and helps you understand the system, so that when you go out there and you're representing yourself as a business and you're providing a service to your client, that you're doing it in the most professional, knowledgeable, and competent manner possible. That reflects on you, but it also reflects on the EGF at the end of the day, because there is an arrangement between you and the EGF. You cannot do those assessments for certification any other way than through the EGF. So we need to make sure that this all works for everybody. Right, so where do we go from here? The next steps are simple. Get a copy of the standard. They're available on the website. Then incorporate those recommendations and requirements into your planning and management process for your next event. Let's get it in. Start doing it. ISO 2012-1 is a management framework that you can apply in your own business if you're a PCO or whatever you want to be. You can apply that, and then you'll see the linkage between the two. You don't have to take the standard, learn the standard, understand what you need to meet that standard, and you're quite ready to go ahead. Ensure that the event sustainability standard is communicated across your event and your suppliers. You start with your client, make sure they understand where you're going with this thing, and then every contract, every agreement you sign, every supplier you appoint, every service provider you appoint needs to understand what is expected of them. The standard tells you what is expected of them. So it's very easy for you to build that into your request for quotes. Select and retain your EGF assessor once you've decided to go this route. All you do is you go to the EGF website, you select an assessor on the EGF website, and you enter an agreement with that assessor. You ask them for an RFQ. They will provide you with their terms and conditions, their pricing, everything else that you need to know. You enter your agreement directly with that assessor. It is not an EGF contract. You and the assessor are the two parties involved. Select and retain your EGF assessor. Undergo the assessment. Remember that the assessor has to be on site. This cannot be done off-site. This has to be here. That assessor must be on site, must be there from before the event starts until the last day of the event. And that way, you're going to get yourself a good evaluation. And then learn from the outcomes and congratulate yourself for going this route. It's not a difficult process. It looks complicated, but I can assure you it's not. And any consultant who knows the standard will be able to help you get through this quite easily. And the EGF, once again, can provide you a list of consultants and assessors. So it's not a difficult process for you to follow. What we're going to do now is I'd like to sum up and just go through a couple of questions. And a couple of the questions came through in advance. I see we've got one sitting in the waiting room, and I will get to that one now. But let's have a look at the questions that were received already. How much does certification cost? Certification costs depend very much on the type, the extent, and the period over which an event takes place. So in other words, if an event is 1 to 2 days, we have established, the EGF has now established a minimum fee that can be charged. So in other words, a 2-day event will cost you in the region of 18,000 Rand. Okay, that includes full services from your assessor, the report, the certification process, and everything else that gets in. Now, I can't hear you, but I can just assume everyone took a deep breath on that. But if you consider that you're using a professional service over a period of 2 days on site, but that assessor also has to spend a minimum of 5 days doing your pre-event planning and your post-event reporting. That's really, you're getting a professional for a very low fee there. And that can be built into any event costing. So you will get your fee quote from your assessor when you enter an agreement with them. All we have done is we've put in a minimum fee so that you're not getting assessors who are underquoting to get the job and then cannot finish the work or do a substandard job at the end of the day. So decide how long. Obviously, a longer event costs more. And then you need to build into things like accommodation and, in many cases, transport. So build those in, and that assessor will give you those figures when you ask them for a quote. Is certification done using a checklist? No, it's done using a score sheet, like I showed you earlier. The score sheet is based on the sustainability standards, and the standards themselves are then updated on a regular basis. So I suppose you could call it a checklist. It's not really a checklist. It's more of a score sheet where we look through each of the various elements. So in other words, it's not, do you have it, yes or no? It's very easy to say yes or no. But in yes, you could be everything from borderline to world best practice. So the score sheet allows us now to actually say how, so you've got it, but how well have you done it? That's how the scores then, you can move from 0 to 10. And that's the difference between a simple checklist and a score sheet. So a checklist, the score sheet is the system we use. How long is the certification valid for? It's valid for the period of that event. It does not transfer to future events, and it cannot be, it can be used by the client to brag, my last event was green. It can be used by you as a PCO to say, my last 5 events have certified green, so I know what I'm doing. But it only applies to that specific event for which you are applying. The benefits for both the organizer and the client. Well, I touched on them a little bit earlier. Benefits of certification are quite important. They have PR value. They have cost reduction value. They have community development value. They have financial benefits in terms of being able to promote their product or whatever it may be. For you as the organizer, it's about building your brand. It's about saying to your client, and would you like to have your event certified? We can get it certified because this is what I know about the system. We will plan a sustainable event for you. So suddenly now you've got another tool in your toolbox, and you can actually build your business based on that. And once you do it, you start generating good business. All my clients in the last 15 years have been word of mouth. And it's simply because they know that they're going to be able to use this. It helps them on their corporate sustainability reporting. It helps them in all ways of marketing and promoting their company as responsible businesses. Small events and gatherings, and tips for them. Guys, you don't have to go the full hog. Let's, for example, say you're doing a small internal meeting, okay? You can learn from the standard by actually not providing bottled water, provide jugs of water on the tables rather, by ensuring that the waste generated is separated, by being careful of what gifts you give away. That little notebook that you've got, is that locally made? Was it made by local entrepreneurs, or has it been imported at great cost from China with all the carbon footprint that comes with it? So you don't have to, your events don't have to be mega. They don't have to be all the lights, cameras, and dancing girls. It's not important. You can start at the very smallest level, and the standard gives you the advice necessary. On the EGF website, you'll also find checklists of how you can actually make your smaller event far more sustainable. And it's very, very easy to do. You start at a point and you just keep growing from there. And once you see it works, you will build on it. The next one you'll make even greener, and the next one even greener. And that's how you start achieving your certification objectives. But as I say, certification is voluntary. Greening, that should be mandatory at the end of the day. Certification of service providers, is this possible? Yes, it is. We have standards applicable to everything from accommodation through to venues, through to AV. We've got those standards. The EGF has sustainability standards for every single element of the event industry. So anyone, wherever, can have that. You can access them as PCOs, so you can judge who you're choosing when you go and evaluate, when you ask for quotes. So these are all available. There's a mine of information available, people. You just need to access it. What are the waste management requirements of green events? One of the questions that, and I think this question relates to what sort of bokashi bin. Do you have bokashi bins? Absolutely. If you could put bokashi bins in for your food waste, all the better. We need to have waste separation systems in place, whether it's on the floor or behind the scenes. Separate the waste, reduce as much as possible it's going to landfill. But, you know, waste starts with a procurement decision, and it starts right at the very beginning. Decide who you're going to use and plan it through that way. So waste management, it's a very important element in a green event, and we look at it quite considerably. I'm just going to try and pull up the question that we have here. Have all the suppliers that have been listed on your green database been previously vetted by the EGF? That's a question I'm going to leave for John and Justin. A lot of them have been, but this is a process that the EGF is undertaking and going forward with. So, yeah, that is one of the questions. People, are there any other questions that you'd like? Sorry,
Greg,
John, carry on.
You wanted me to answer that, Greg, just
Yes,
in terms
go
of the
ahead.
question. So, you know, obviously the event green database, you know, was formulated in 2018. We had green criteria, rough green criteria at the time. In order to repop, you know, to launch it again, whoever was a existing company in 2018 and existing company in 2020, we have submitted them again, but we still need to do a second round of criteria and actually verification. So all we did was we took who was, you know, had the initial verification in 2018 and up to 2020, and we just submitted them as long as their business were operating, and as long as there was no other contrary information, we did submit it. But we are going to do a second round next year to try and there are certain companies that are certified and they've got certification processes. So we are very aware of where we are, but we had to start somewhere, and that was a good way to start. Good place to start.
Absolutely. So I think bearing any further questions, although, sorry, there was one question earlier.
I have another question from Gary. Are the standards going to be updated? Yes, they are. They were updated earlier this year, 2025, and the standards are then reviewed every 5 years. So as they are at the moment, we review that standard every 5 years. However, if there is an international change, or there is a significant change at the ISO level, or there is a standards change as a result of things we're learning through the certification process here locally, then we would go update much more regularly, and all assessors and the information on the website will be updated immediately. So the standard itself is done once every 5 years or as needed in the interim.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, everybody. This has been an absolutely incredible and invaluable session. It's really fantastic that, like Justin said earlier on at the beginning, this has been rather a long journey to get to this point where we are now, for the very first time in South Africa, on the African continent, as far as I'm concerned, or understand, having an accreditation and an assessment system. So it's a really proud moment today for the Event Greening Forum. We know that Greg obviously has been doing it for a number of years on his own, and we were so excited when he agreed to partner with the EGF. So thank you very much, Greg, and for licensing your product to us here at the EGF, that we can launch this to the eventing industry and the broader community in the eventing space. I'm really encouraging my fellow, as a PCO, as a professional event organizer, I'm really encouraging my colleagues in the industry, my fellow event organizers, my fellow professional conference organizers, please, it's time now that we put our money, so to speak, where our mouths are. Let's stop talking the talk about greening. We're all doing it. It's wonderful, and I'm very excited that people talk about it. But it's now time that we actually implement the talk. You talk to your clients to say, this is what we are doing, this is how we can doing it, and it's going to be a valuable PR asset to our clients. And as the globe starts moving towards having KPIs in big corporations, etc., and government institutions implementing these practices within their business strategies, it's something that you're going to be able to offer them. And as Greg said, the cost implication to having an assessor or a consultant to come on board and assist you through this process is actually negligible when you think about the amount of work that they will put into ensuring that your event is successful, ensuring the opportunity for you to be able to showcase the work that you do around sustainability and greening in the eventing space, and what we're doing for the environment. Because importantly, we all know the impact of waste and carbon footprint on the environment. So it's time we actually did our fair share to make sure that we're actually walking the talk that we've all been talking about over the years. And that was Justin and the founders of the Event Greening Forum's plan right from the word go, is to eventually get to the point where we are now offering certification. So it's really been a long journey, but we are here. All the information is available from the Event Greening Forum, so you can get hold of Lynn, and she'll gladly share the information. We are going to put all the necessary contact details, etc., onto our website. It's going to be updated with all this information, so you'll be able to get it there. The green database, as Justin mentioned earlier on, is now live. It's been updated. It's on our green database website. You can link to it from the main Event Greening Forum website, which is eventgreening.co.za. And as I said, the certification and the assessors, we encourage and welcome applications for those of you who would like to become an assessor, provided you meet the criteria and standards that Greg enumerated during his presentation. We invite you now to apply your applications to the Event Greening Forum to become an assessor. And we invite those who do not want to be an assessor, we invite you now to have your events assessed. We also can provide you with a list of greening consultants that can help ensure that when you do get your event greening, your events assessed, that you do it successfully for your clients. I'm really super excited about that. And then on the last note, before I say goodbye to everybody, is Cheryl asked, is there a recording of this? Yes, there is a recording of it. It will be edited and placed onto our Event Greening Forum YouTube site. So you'll be able to check out the recording from there in the next few days. And we'll obviously advertise the link on our social media platforms. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Justin, once again, for your leadership and getting it over the line. Thank you very much, Greg. We are excited to have you on board and to be making use of your innovative system that's going to revolutionize the event greening and sustainability implementation in South Africa. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Basilman and Heritage Ecosystems for sponsoring today's event, and our partners, South African Tourism, for coming on board and bringing this event to you today. So thank you very much to those parties.
And John, just a thanks to Gavin. I know I did thank him earlier, but it was maybe during the technical difficulties, so maybe he didn't hear. And also thanks to Greg for helping us get where we are. And I know it was when we were trying to manage the technical issues we had, so maybe they didn't hear. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Can I just, I see there's a question that's coming from Tabatso. Are you going to roll out this out to other countries? I'm based in Botswana. We can, assessors can come and do it for you, not necessarily under the EGF, unless the EGF is prepared to certify events outside of South Africa, but the standards would apply the same. So it is possible. It can be done.
And if you want to start doing assessments at Tabatso and you see yourself as becoming an assessor, we're happy as the EGF, and I'm sure Greg will be more than happy to provide you with the training. And then the EGF will be more than happy to accredit you should you meet the standards that Greg sets for assessors. So you're also able to start this in Botswana or any other African country. So if we've got other African country members on the call today, and you feel like this is something that you would like to take forward into your regions, absolutely. I think the EGF, we are a South African-based organization, but we do want to work together with our African country friends and partners. So it's also an opportunity to start the green journey in these African countries if you haven't done so already. And if there is an organization similar to the EGF, get them to reach out to us, and we'll happily find a way of working together, because after all, it's all about collaboration. Justin, I see you wanted to perhaps say something there before we say bye.
No, I'm just very happy to hear about someone from Africa. It's good. All good.
Absolutely. Right. Is there anything lastly that you would like to say before we end this?
Myself.
Yes, you Greg.
No, look, I see we overran time quite a bit. I apologize for anyone whose cell phone has now run out of time, but I think there were some valid questions, and I needed to try and get it as in-depth as I could. But anyone who has any questions, please, you're welcome to forward your emails on, or your messages on to John, and I will happily answer anything you have. Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thanks, Justin. And thank you all for sticking with us right to the end. I see most of you were able to stay right to the end. As Greg said, we did go a little bit over, but I think it was very important that we all got the full understanding of what the process is all about. And if you want to catch up on it, catch us on our YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, and have a super day forward. Bye-bye from the EGF.